Vamos con la séptima parte de la sección de Reading and Use of English, o sea, la parte lectiva, gramatical del examen de First Certificate de Cambridge University, que se vería algo así: 4 textos A, B, C, D, seguidos por 10 preguntas de comprensión, que las tenemos que rellenar, responder con A, B, C, D, según el texto al que se refiere cada pregunta. Pero antes de intentar el ejercicio del examen, vamos a echar un vistazo a esto que pone Cultures and Customs, o sea que vamos a centrarnos en un vocabulario que tiene que ver eso con las culturas y las costumbres de distintos países hoy, y nos dice complete the text and with the correct passive form of the verb in brackets. Entonces tenemos un verbo entre paréntesis detrás de cada hueco en este texto, y tenemos que poner ese verbo en una forma de voz pasiva adecuada. Si queréis pausar el vídeo aquí e intentar el ejercicio a solas, pues ahora es el momento. Si no, pues voy a proceder con las respuestas y daré una pequeña explicación de cómo he llegado a cada respuesta. Okay, so let's get started. La tomatina takes place each year in Buñol, a small town near Valencia, in Spain. Many stories are told about how it all started. Bueno, se cuentan muchas historias. Muchas historias son contadas de cómo empezó todo eso. También sería aceptable many stories have been told. Se han contado muchas historias. Muchas historias han sido contadas sobre cómo empezó todo esto. Seguimos. One is that in 1945, a group of young people attending a festival grabbed tomatoes from a nearby market stall and started a playful food fight. They were stopped by the police, es decir, la policía les paró, fueron parados por la policía. But on the same day in August, a year after that, a food battle was fought in Buñol again, with local people bringing tomatoes to throw at each other. O sea, literalmente una batalla de comida fue luchada de nuevo en Buñol. Es decir, vamos, se libró otra batalla, hubo otra pelea en Buñol el año siguiente. Sigo. In the 1950s, the event was banned, but the locals continued and were locked up in jail. Es decir, en los años 50 fue prohibido. The event was banned, but the locals continued and were locked up in jail. Fueron encerrados en la cárcel. They were locked up in jail. The people of Buñol demonstrated against the ban, and finally, in 1959, they were allowed to hold the event again. En el año 59 fueron permitidos de nuevo a celebrar este evento. They were allowed to hold the event again. However, a strict code of conduct was introduced, controlling issues such as how the fight was to begin. Se introdujo un estricto código de conducta. Es decir, un código de conducta, unas normas fueron introducidos. Since then, the festival has been attended by more and more people each year. Esta vez en present perfect. Desde entonces el festival ha sido asistido por cada vez más personas cada año. The festival has been attended by more and more people each year. Vale, pues vamos a echar un vistazo al ejercicio del examen, o sea, la parte 7, part 7 of Reading and Use of English of the First Certificate Exam. Vamos a ver cuál es el título y vamos a ver cómo deberíamos hacer esta parte del examen. Entonces dice, The world's strangest annual events. 4 travelers talk about experiencing a very unusual event held annually around the world. Entonces vamos a leer 4 textos, A, B, C, D, acerca de, pues eso, las experiencias de 4 personas experimentando 4 eventos extraños alrededor del mundo. y luego vamos a mirar las 10 preguntas que os comenté antes que hacen referencia a esos 4 textos. A. Sadie Grossman. Last year, I was one of 30,000 people who took part in La Tomatina, an annual festival held in Buñol, Spain, during which townspeople and visitors fill the streets and take part in a tomato fight. I've neither laughed so hard nor feared for my life as much as I did on that day. Trucks of tomatoes were dumped in the streets, and I soon found myself picking up handfuls of squashed fruit and throwing them at whoever happened to be closest. Most people participating were considerate, but a few were not. I was thankful that I'd left my phone back at the hotel and worn clothes I didn't mind getting ruined. I did wish I'd invested in a pair of goggles, though, as being hit in the eye by a tomato meant I couldn't see out of it very well for a couple of days. It was definitely an experience I'll never forget, but one I have no desire to repeat. B. Joe Haythorpe. I went with friends to the mud festival held in Boryong, South Korea, because several of them had been before, loved it, and wanted to go again. The 2-week event is centered on an area of Boryong Beach set up with water slides and pools to play in while covered in huge quantities of the mineral-rich mud that's taken from the shore near the city. It's great fun for the entire family, as well as groups of friends. Apart from playing in the mud, we also attended some great concerts and shopped for mud-based skin creams. Although it's only been going since 1998, it already attracts millions of Koreans and Western tourists annually. But if you're considering going, book your accommodation early, as room rates triple closer to the event. All in all, this festival was by far the most fun one I've ever been to. C. Charlie Trainer. Cheese rolling on Cooper's Hill in Gloucestershire, England, is the ideal activity for fans of extreme sports, whether as spectators or as participants, and is definitely one of the craziest traditions I've ever witnessed. I watched in amazement as madly courageous men and women threw themselves down a steep hill, tumbling head over heels while chasing a large round cheese. The cheese always gets to the bottom of the hill first, but for each race there is a prize, a cheese worth a lot of money, for the first person to do so. Thankfully, that day everyone survived without seriously hurting themselves. The event is free, but because of the large crowds, I struggled to find a place from which I could actually see much of the action or use my camera. There were also 4 uphill races, but they were a lot less exciting. D. Louisa Dark. During the Monkey Buffet Festival in Lop Buri, Thailand, cakes, fruit and vegetables are piled up on tables in the streets for 3,000 local monkeys to enjoy. The festival was established to boost tourism in the area, and it's worked. Huge crowds now travel there from all over the world, many dressed in monkey costumes. There is traditional music, dance and sculpture, all with a monkey theme, and the monkeys themselves roam free. They have no fear of people, and we were warned that they might try to grab our phones, hats, or even jewelry and run off with them. I'm glad to say they didn't, but at one point a young monkey jumped up onto my shoulder, making me very uncomfortable. We were given sticks to protect ourselves from the boldest monkeys, but I didn't want to use one. I was glad when the monkey climbed down. However, it was very entertaining to watch the animals from a distance, happily playing and eating. Pues vamos a ver las preguntas entonces y las soluciones y las explicaciones Esta parte pues la voy a hacer total y exclusivamente en inglés, entonces si tenéis alguna duda dejadme un comentario abajo. Vale, bien. Which person mentions, number 1, the possibility of people at the event having their belongings stolen? And the answer is D, Louisa Dark, because she talks about the monkeys perhaps stealing your possessions. She says, they have no fear of people, and we were warned that they might try to grab our phones, hats, or even jewelry and run off with them. So it's D, Louisa Dark, who mentions the possibility of people at the event having their belongings stolen. So, number 2, which person mentions regretting being without an item of protective equipment? Well, the answer here is A, Sadie Grossman. So what protective equipment did she wish she had, or wish she had had at the event? She says, I did wish I'd invested in a pair of goggles, though, as being hit in the eye by a tomato meant I couldn't see very well out of it for a couple of days. So she needed a pair of goggles to protect her eyes, and she didn't have them. So A, Sadie Grossman, is the person who regretted being without an item of protective equipment. Okay, number 3, which person mentions the bravery of the people who took part? And the answer here is C, Charlie Trainer. So how does he say that the participants were brave? The bravery of the participants is mentioned here. He says, I watched in amazement as madly courageous men and women threw themselves down a steep hill. So that is how we know that Charlie Trainer is the person who mentions the bravery of the people who took part. He calls them amazingly courageous. Okay, number 4. Which person mentions a warning about organizing a trip to the event? Well, the answer is B, Joe Haythorpe. So what warning about organizing a trip to the event does Joe Haythorpe give? He says, if you are considering going, book your accommodation early as room rates triple closer to the event. So he's warning people who are thinking about going to the event that they must book in advance because the prices go up quite significantly. So that is the warning that he gives to people who are wanting to organize a trip to the event. Okay, number 5. Which person mentions an injury caused during the event? The answer is A, Sadie Grossman. She mentions being hit in the eye by a tomato, which made it very difficult to see out of her eye for a few days after the event. So she is the person who mentions an injury caused during the event. Okay, number 6. Which person mentions how hard it was to get a good position to view the event? Well, the answer again here is C, Charlie Trainer. He says that he struggled to find a place from which he could actually see much of the action or use his camera. So, yeah, he is the person who found it difficult to see the event, or who mentioned how hard it was to get a good position to view the event, paraphrased. Okay, number 7. Which person mentions products that were available to buy during the event? Well, the answer is B, Joe Haythorpe. So what was available to buy during the event? Well, he says, apart from playing in the mud, we also attended some great concerts and shopped for mud-based skin creams. So that's the key there. They bought some skin creams. Those were the products that were available to buy at the event. Okay, so number 8, which person mentions experiencing two strongly contrasting emotions? Well, the answer is A, Sadie Grossman. So what two emotions, two strongly opposing, very different emotions, did she mention experiencing? She says, I've neither laughed so hard nor feared for my life as much as I did on that day, suggesting that it was both very, very fun or funny or entertaining or exciting, but also very, very scary. So those are the two very strongly opposing emotions that Sadie Grossman, A, experienced at the event. Okay, penultimate question. Number 9. Which person mentions people with a particular interest who would like the event? Well, the answer is C. Charlie Trainer at the Cheese Rolling says that this is an ideal activity for fans of extreme sports, whether as spectators or participants. So those people, fans of extreme sports, they have a particular interest and they would particularly enjoy this event. Okay, and the last question then. So which person mentions the reason why the event originally began? Well, the answer here is D. Louisa Dark tells us how this Monkey Buffet Festival began. In the 4th line, she says, the festival was established to boost tourism in the area. So she, Louisa Dark, D, mentions the reason why the event originally began. Excellent. We finished another amazing, informative video. Goodbye.